Watch as the earth rumbles under the heels of the angry mobs. The debt is spiraling out of control as the EU struggles to survive. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into this here. This is a press release right from the ECB's website. I'm not going to read too much from this. The font is very small. But essentially it's talking about Greece. ECB's governing council lifts current waiver of minimum credit rating requirements for its marketable instruments issued or guaranteed by the Hellenic Republic. Now let's get into some better language that we can all understand. I just wanted to show you the actual press release because I always show you the information itself, not just taking the mainstream media's word for it. So the FT said ECB raises heat on Athens with curb on cash for banks. So they go in to say that the Eurozone's monetary policy makers have tightened Greek lenders' access to cheap liquidity. So already they had an issue of this liquidity that they were giving them. They want to put that stranglehold on them right away, banning the use of the country's debt as collateral for the ECB's cash weeks before a limit was expected to come into force. So it was supposed to be at the end of the month when they would cut off all of their life support, and already they're beginning to tighten the noose. But they still have what's known as the ELA, and that is their last source of funding in this regard for the time being. So there are other options that they have. They can go in and raise some temporary money, but I believe that it would be pushed to the last minute. It's just the same things that happen with the debt ceiling. Even though they know way ahead of time that this is coming, they have the same issue every single time. They fight and they argue over it, and then they go over the line, and then they make a last minute decision, and of course always sneaking a few tasty tidbits into the bills that make things worse for all of us. So this is what's happening in Greece right now, and of course all of this will account for nothing but the same problems over and over again. We're going to see more debt, and we are going to see more control by the ECB and others, because unfortunately they're going to have to get their money from somewhere. If they don't go the ECB route, which is what they're promising that they're going to do, where exactly are they going to get their money? And that is from other nations. We saw how Russia said, perhaps we'll make you an offer you can't refuse. And then there are other possibilities where they can get their money from. So whoever it is that they are indebted to, that is exactly who they're going to be controlled by. And that's the problem, because we have maximum debt. Sure, they could very well get out of debt, but it's not going to come easy. So I just wanted to note specifically, the reason I mentioned this is because they are in heavy amounts of debt, not just their country. I'll show you other countries as well. But they are always going to be controlled by whoever it is that's lending them that cash. Debt mountains spark fears of another crisis. This is the change in the GDP, debt to GDP ratio 2007 to 2014. So at around 2007, we had the beginning of the financial crisis where it really began to take off. And this here goes to show you how much the debt has increased since then. Greece, 100% increase in those past few years, where they promised that they were fixing all of the problems. Look at Ireland, Portugal, China, Spain, Sweden, all around the world, in fact, are going ahead and increasing their debt significantly. Very few countries have decreased their debt. And the reason is because they run off of debt. Nobody wants to give up on this system because it's very easy. You just get your central bank to print up some money, throw it out there in the system, and devalue your currencies. And why not? Everyone else is doing it. You need to follow the leader, and that's just what is happening right now. If I forward further down in the article, they said that they face potential vulnerabilities because of a high household debt. The countries are the Netherlands, South Korea, Canada, Sweden, Australia, Malaysia, and Thailand. It's like a balloon. If you squeeze debt in one place, it pops up somewhere else in the system. Okay, now what exactly have I been saying consistently over these past few years is that the system itself is built upon debt. The global bankers control the debt, so of course there isn't going to be any sort of removal of the debt. It's going to go from one place to another. You never have wealth that is destroyed. It's simply siphoned away from you and I into the hands of the elite. And that's what has been happening, particularly over the past few years. And I'll show you exactly what's going on right here as we have a grand disparity developing. I wanted to show you what I wrote about in my book, talking about the debt to GDP ratio, very relevant here. It's an incredibly high number that where we are at right now, but the naysayers will still suggest that this is a manageable level of debt. Although a debt level that borders anywhere near the GDP is hardly manageable, let's assume that it is for a moment. The hidden truth is that these numbers do not include the largest parts of the debt. So when you include the unfunded liabilities, you have a situation that is impossible, mathematically impossible to pay back. Let's move on right here. And we're talking, this is the Chicago Sun-Times. And essentially, that Obama's budget is relying on a series of familiar accounting tricks to show $1.8 trillion in deficit reduction over a decade, an amount that would shrink by almost half if they were excluded. So of course they're playing tricks, they're cooking the books. This is no different than how they have intragovernmental debt, which essentially allows them to borrow or never pay back from their own sources like Social Security. See, you don't need all that quote-unquote surplus. Instead of actually using it right now to pay for the debt, they simply borrow into the future, and they're doing so here again with the Obama budget because it's so terrible since he's taken office. And here it is, they're trying to reduce that, not by actually going ahead with certain policies that would reduce the deficit, but simply covering over it. The accounting steps essentially inflate the White House's baseline predictions of future deficits. Then the White House claims greater deficit savings. This often reminds me of what Bill Clinton did in order to reduce the deficit. You simply take money from one area and put it somewhere else. And of course, all that does is kicks the can down the road, and it really deceives the people. But as long as you hand them their Obama phone and free Obamacare that happens to include 21 new taxes, then you are basically saving everybody, and again, Superman under his suit. This is what I wanted to get to, is that we have a geopolitical shift that has been occurring. One of those ways that we can see that, an indicator of that, is this. Belgium is planning to retrieve 200 metric tons of gold deposited to the UK storage in the 1930s out of fear of Nazi theft. Belgium planning to retrieve 200 tons, and essentially what they want from this is what all of the countries want. They want their wealth back. That's what they're doing. It's not necessarily that this is going to make waves in the economy or anything. All I'm suggesting is that the countries are starting to not really trust each other anymore, and they're starting to repatriate their gold. They're starting to buy less of the US debt, and this is becoming a big problem when we look at it, because the system itself is changing. This is no different than what has happened before. Look at what happened just after Bretton Woods, or even just before. We have two completely different systems, and with one agreement, things change relatively rapidly. And it took a big war for this agreement to be signed. Of course, there's reasons why they went to war in the first place. We will not get into that here. I would just like to say that things are changing. There is a shift that is occurring. Record 2,000 billionaires in world hold 6.7 trillion. The only reason I'm mentioning this here is to talk about the great disparity that is occurring. And essentially, we're looking at more and more billionaires being formed. At the same time, we have more and more poverty in the cities around the world. I'll move on quickly because I have got into this multiple times before. Sotheby's auction breaks sales record. So you have the largest amount of wealthy here ever, and they are buying up everything they can. I talked about the super yachts, the luxury cars, the luxury houses that are selling for record prices in areas like London and Monaco and Manhattan, and here they are buying fine art, still in many ways in a boom, although they're claiming that it has plateaued. I'm seeing statistics to determine otherwise. Essentially, we'll look at this and just take it for what it is, and that is more wealthy people buying up more big ticket items and more poverty at the same exact time. And this isn't going to change. We're going to see more debt. Doesn't matter which kind of governments get into power, we're going to see more debt overall. It's just going to pop up somewhere else. And this is what I want to leave off with, that the global debt exceeds $100 trillion as governments binge, according to the BIS. And this is out of Bloomberg. And I've seen statistics showing over 200 trillion. And does that even include the unfunded liabilities? Assuredly, it does not. Once you include those, you have numbers that it doesn't even matter anymore. The amount of debt that they're in, this far exceeds the GDP. The amount of debt globally has soared more than 40% to 100 trillion since the first signs of the financial crisis as governments borrowed to put their economies out of recession. Companies took advantage of low interest rates. What we have is a situation that isn't getting any better. In fact, look how I just covered Australia going into a further territory of negative interest rates going downward, and you have I believe it was Denmark introducing the negative interest rate on their mortgage. So in fact, giving away the homes for free money being handed out there. And then we look at the capital controls that are taking place in the banking system, where we have individuals in the US and in other regions, but most of it seems to be from the US, where they are being told that they're going to be limited on the amount of money that they can transfer in and out of these particular accounts. So they're beginning with that. At the same time, they're imposing all of these bail-in schemes. We have an issue that we need to be worried about, and this isn't something to take lightly. So I'll leave it off with there before I begin to rant on. And essentially what I wanted to say is that we need to prepare. People are looking for solutions. The solutions take place at the grassroots. Don't look for governments to save you. Don't look for an individual to save you. Don't trust what anybody says. You need to do your own homework, do your research, and I personally recommend real assets. You need to be holding onto the things that are tangible. Whatever is best for you. If you happen to be a billionaire and you want fine art, go ahead with that route. Enjoy some of the fine art, but you need to diversify. Do not put all your money into one specific thing, and that is very, very crucial. Have as much of that spread out as you possibly can. Invest in the real assets. If you think you need to be a billionaire to have real assets, you just need to really think about this for a second. Why not have some storable food? And I'm not talking about the freeze-dried food even. What about canned food? Things that you will consume in the near future. Just keep extra of it in your house. Have the bags of rice. Have things that stay on the shelf for long periods of time. And that is a great start that you can have today. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to become a subscriber on the YouTube. It is important to get on there. Join over 15,000 people that are here ready to learn the truth. I'm going to come out with all sorts of programs for each and every one of you. I assure you, hang in there. I'm trying to comment to every one of you and email you back, and I'm trying to give advice as much as possible, and I really appreciate all the kind words you guys are giving me. And don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free, and that is available at themoneygps.com. You scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.